Today we're getting into some Christmas in July kitsch. Welcome to All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. I'm hanging with my girl Annie of Crafting with Annie Jones for her Christmas Palooza collab. You'll find a link to Annie's channel as well as a link to the creator's playlist in the description box. To satisfy my mid-mod craving, we're going to be making a kitschy Christmas wreath from packing materials and other odds and ends that can be found around the house. Let's get into it. I always save any packing foam that comes along with any deliveries we may get. So I grabbed a couple of these packing cylinders. They're like mini pool noodles. We're going to use these to make our wreath base. And we're going to need some duct tape and some fabric glue. And some homemade crepe paper festooning. I'll link my video that shows how to make it. You can always use tinsel garland, of course, whatever you got. Anyway, this will get us started. The first thing I want to do is add a curve to my foam cylinders just by curling them up on themselves and bending them. This is going to make them much easier to form into a wreath shape. And I also feel like I want our wreath shape to be more of an oval than a circle. But, that's totally up to you. Whatever blows your hair back, do that. I think that the oval shape will give me more of a mid-mod feel. Oh, you know what? We're also going to need some crepe paper. Forgot to mention that in the beginning. Grab yourself a piece of duct tape and we're going to line up the ends of our foam cylinders and wrap the duct tape around to connect them. I'm sure you've seen this done before. Nothing spectacularly new here, right? And of course, we'll do the same at the other ends, meeting them up and wrapping them with duct tape. Yeah, I'm digging that shape. That's a really good oval, so we're going to go with that. I'll add a wee bit of fabric glue right here where the tape is, and we're going to take our crepe paper and just wrap it around the foam to cover it up. Give us a nice, cleaner base. I'm finishing up the wrapping here. And then I'm going to add a wee bit more of the fabric glue to hold down that end piece of crepe paper. You can use whatever glue that you prefer. I like fabric glue because it works on anything basically. I usually use 3-in-1, but I have not been able to get it lately. So FabriFix is pretty much the same thing as 3-in-1. That looks pretty good. Right, now we're going to wrap our wreath form with our festooning. Again, I'll be using fabric glue to anchor it in place. And we're just going to wrap it until it's completely covered. I make my festooning garland around 30 inches long, but again, totally up to you. You can make it any length, short, long, whatever you like. This is just what works for me. Now I'm going to wrap this pretty tightly. I don't really want it to shift around once it's on there. I used 5 and a bit of a 6 30-inch length garland to wrap this form. Okay, this guy's all wrapped and we can start embellishing. I wanted something for the middle and I really didn't want to dig out all of my Christmas supplies. They're well tucked away. So I figured I'd make my own. I recently got a new tool, a Creality laser cutter. So I designed myself a very mid-mod Santa and I'm going to cut that out and that's what we're going to use to embellish the center of our wreath. I'm cutting my Santa from 3mm basswood and here's a look at the Creality Falcon 2 in action. Cutting my original design. I gotta tell you, this was great. It took less than 10 minutes to cut, and it cut everything out, including the lettering. I was very pleased with how quick and efficient this was. This was so fast, and gave me such a clean cut. No sanding necessary. Love that. Look how clean this cut is. When I lift the wood, the pieces pop right out. I don't even have to do anything. Look at that. Fabulous. Nice and clean. So this guy's going to go right here in the center. And, we're going to add some doodads around him as well. Here's his nose and mustache. And the brim of his hat, which I cut separately. And I also cut out the words Merry Christmas too. They turned out so good. I mean, I could never do this with my scroll saw. I could cut the Santa for him. But these letters and stars, I mean, look at these stars. Love it. You know I'll be cutting lots of stars in the future, don't you? You know I will, because that's how I roll. Here's the lettering. Look at this. Excellent. All these teeny tiny letters that are going to go right across his beard. Perfect. Okay, on to the painting. I want this to have a very simple mid-century look. So I'm going to keep it, to just a few colors. And I'm going to start by painting his face with Ceramcoat Tawny. 2 coats, that's my standard. His nose is actually attached to the piece that incorporates his mustache and his mouth, so we're going to have to paint that with Tawny too. I'll paint the brim of his hat, as well as his beard and mustache, and the little pom-pom ball on the end of his hat with Ceramcoat white. I gotta tell you guys, I am loving this laser. And I realize, not everybody wants a laser or has room for a laser. But if you do, I would definitely check this out. I had one prior, and it just took so long to cut anything. It was okay for engraving, but I mostly cut things. I mean, that's what I'm interested in. So, yeah, this was great. And as I said, expect to see lots of other projects cut with the laser. And who knows, maybe I'll even do some engraving. We'll see. I'm going to grab my Folk Art floating medium here, and we're going to shade in his cheeks. I have a 3/4 inch flat brush that I'm going to dip into my medium, and we're going to work this into the bristles. I'm going to scoop up some paint onto the corner of my brush, side loading. This color is called Moonlit Rose. It's a Ceramcoat color. I'm going to stroke my brush on my plate to blend the medium with the paint on the bristles. Right, so this will give me the gradient of color that's going to allow me to shade. Holding the paint corner of my brush where I want my darkest color, I'm going to float this rose color right around, creating his cheeks. Just stroking an arch, as you can see. And I reload my brush as necessary. When it starts to get skippy, I just load it up again. There we go. Looks pretty good. Let's feather this out just a wee bit. Yeah, that's better. You can see that the color is darkest at the edge and fades as it moves toward the middle of the cheek. I'm going to paint in his lips with the Moonlit Rose also. No floating medium, just straight paint. I want him to have jolly eyes, which I'm going to paint in with Ceramcoat Spring Green. These two are just arch-shaped, so I'm keeping him simple to stay in my mid-mod aesthetic. I did trace in his eyes with a pencil prior to painting. It's just easier for me. Otherwise, they'd be different sizes. So we'll get those filled in real quick. I'll base coat his hat with 2 coats of Ceramcoat Watermelon. I'm using the end of a paintbrush to dot in his eyebrows with some white. Just 4 wee dots right across the top there. Now we're going to do some outlining. I decided to use Americana Cherry Red to outline pretty much everything on our Santa. I like to pair this red with the watermelon because it's just slightly darker, enough to see it up against the red of the watermelon. There's just enough contrast there. One of the characteristics of mid-mod illustration that I've noticed is that the outlines are usually skinny in one area and widen in another. So I'm going to try to emulate that as much as I can. Here along the mustache, I'll start out a wee bit thicker, and then we'll kind of taper it off as we get to the edge. Personally, I really dig the way that the varying widths of the outlines look. I think that's one of the things that really attracts me to this kind of illustration. I'm going to dot a circle right in the center of his mouth with the cherry red, and then we'll outline it. Now we're not going to do anything too fancy on his brim, just a couple of straight lines. Let's do a little outlining on his head, the little stocking part there. Then we'll kind of go around the edge, outline that as well. I like the contrast of this cherry with the watermelon, as I said, and usually if I'm shading a piece that's red, I'm going to float it with the cherry. It's subtle enough, and yet, you can still see it. It still has some impact. And his pom-pom, can't forget that. I'll outline the underside of his brows. Let's do his eyes. Give him a couple character lines right off the corner of his eye there, the outside corner. There we go. I switched to a larger round brush to outline his face and beard. I think this is a number 2. So I'm going to go around his face first. I really want to emphasize the varying shape of the line here along his beard. I think that's where, it's most noticeable. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? Ruh-roh. Just dropped a dot of red smack dab in the middle of his beard. Of course I did. Gonna leave that to dry. Then we'll dot some white over it. Now that the outlining is done, I'll add graphic shading with Ceramcoat Palmetto, this light green here. We won't be using floating medium for this. We're going to stick to geometric shapes and lines. This is more aligned with the 1950s mid-mod perspective, I think. So I'm painting in kind of like an E shape. Yeah, it's like a stylized capital A. And I'm going to do this on the opposite side of the brim as well, but we'll reverse the A. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of hard to see because it's a very light green, but I'd like that subtleness, that softness. But it's basically a reversed A. This side, of course, will just be a wee bit smaller. And I'm just going to do a couple of lines here on his mustache, maintaining that varying width lining as much as I can. Same for his pom-pom and his beard, just little lines. I just put my hand in that white dot on his beard, so we're going to have to dot over it again. We'll just drop another white dot right on there. There we go. A couple of quick white highlights along his cheeks. And we're going to highlight his character lines too. I added a couple of white dot highlights in the corners of his eyes as well. Let's stroke a highlight on his nose and on his lips. I come back in with some of that cherry red, and I'm going to add some accents, just little dashes on different parts, his beard, his mustache, maybe some on his pom-pom. I think this will kind of accentuate where we added the green shading. I base coated the starbursts with white, and now I'm going to add some parsley highlights. I'm using my extra fine 000 detail brush to add these lines. And I'm not outlining the entire thing, I'm just kind of more or less, I guess, like a drop shadow. You could say that. Now we're going to assemble him using some of this tight bond wood glue. I'm going to add all these pieces, but I'm going to hold off on the stars. Once I place him on the wreath, then we'll affix the stars. I'll dry fit my lettering across his beard before I affix them with the wood glue. And you can see I painted the words 2 different shades of green, spring green and parsley green. Both are Ceramcoat colors. The spring green is just ever so slightly darker than the parsley. I really like the way they look together. Again, very subtle but noticeable. Once I get all these pieces assembled, I'm going to spray him with a clear matte sealer. Let's start assembling the wreath. I added some Jingle Bells at the top and bottom of the wreath so that they'll frame out Santa. I'm going to glue him into place with a little hot glue. The top of his hat and right along the bottom of his beard. Just place them and hold firmly until the glue sets. Now we can attach those starbursts with wood glue. I added green and red dots in the center of them. I don't know, I felt like they needed something. There was just too much white going on. We're going to do this big guy at the very top of his hat and the wee guy right there where I have it on the brim. Glue that into place there. I'm completely loving the starbursts, so we're going to add a few on either side of him. I would also like to bring in a few vintage C9 bulbs in a wee cluster, something like this. I think that gives it a real retro feel. Right, let's hot glue the stars, and then we'll get to the clusters. Okay, the first bulb. I probably should have made that lower. I'm going to wind up having to do the red on the bottom, I think. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, now we'll get this side glued down, and that's pretty much it. I think this is just the right amount of doodads. I don't want to overplay it because the wreath itself is so busy. So, once we get the bulbs on, we're going to stop there. Okay, let's take a final look. So here we go. We have a very vintage wreath made from packing foam, Crepe Paper, and doodads. Absolutely loving my Santa centerpiece, cut with my new toy, the Creality Falcon 2 laser. You know, I'm going to be using that machine on the rag. It was just so easy and fast to cut one of my own original designs, and I just want to keep creating. I loved it. So, anyway, I hope you liked today's projects. I love being able to upcycle and recycle things that would otherwise wind up in a landfill, like the packing foam. Let me know what you guys think. I really appreciate that. I want to thank Annie for hosting the Christmas Palooza collab. You'll find a link to her channel, as well as a link to the playlist in the description box. My list of supplies will be there too. Be sure to check out all of the talented creators participating. Show them some love. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.